the message becomes much stronger. I will go into details with every element in the next slide. So what does that look like in the next slide, please, in actual practice? This is the journey I've seen again and again working with government in the Middle East. Like, for example, in Jordan, we didn't start by asking the Ministry of Health to institutionalize ECD. We started by working together, sharing evidence, and co-developing trainings. So under the Ahlan Simpson Play to Learn initiatives, we have developed a training for midwives and nurses to integrate and embed ECD into the normal checkups for like children. We started by working together, and over time, one technical colleague within the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, became one of the strongest champions. This person was always there in the meetings, was always great, bringing new ideas, was always like advocating for ECD within the ministry. Eventually, the work that we've created actually have contributed to an accreditation of the training by the Jordanian Nursing Council for the training of midwives, nurses, and doctors as a mandatory for the renewal of their licenses on annual basis. That didn't happen because of one meeting. It actually happened because of years of partnership with the ministry. So we've created this relationship with the ministry that led into building trust, to investing in champions by building their capacity, involving them, but also providing them the opportunity and the space to present themselves. So we would nominate them to participate in global conferences and meetings. They were like in meetings with our CEO and like senior leadership of our organization and other organizations, also meeting with donors and politicians and decision makers. So we've also created them the space to also shine and be the champions. And this actually happened because of years of partnership, not only by one meeting or one advocacy event. So the next slide. So why I'm talking about champions and why champions matters? Because people influence policies. Champions influence people. Many of the best champions we've worked with were not actually ministers or deputy ministers or directors. They were like technical people working in the ministry who are very passionate about ECD and who are all aware of the importance of ECD and its integration into different programs for the best for the children and the families. So, for example, during the work with on the childcare policy with the ministry, with the National Council for Family Affairs, with the Ministry of Education, in Jordan, the process, we had like this champion who were able to actually connect departments together, find the linkages between the different ministries who are involved in the development of the policy, kept the discussions moving, and encouraged others to actually support the policy. Nobody usually appoint them. They are like those people who are so passionate about things and want things to get done. When we actually identify them and spot them from like the different meetings, and we decided that these people are the people we want to work with. So they chose to lead, but we also provided them with the skills to do proper advocacy and actually to be able to lead. So why the champions? Because they're the ones that actually open doors for us. They build trust and credibility. They also like influence decisions. They are like inside the ministry who are able to influence the decisions with the different departments. They also know the different departments. I always bring this example that we've spent like few months to work with the Ministry of Education in Lebanon just to realize that we were actually working with the wrong department. Because when we went to this department to say we want to work with you, they were like, okay, yeah, we welcome. They were like very happy that there is a new project coming to them. So they didn't want to, they were hesitant to kind of like tell us like we are not the right department. You have to go work with this department. But having these champions part of the work that we're doing, we were like 100% sure that we are working with the right departments. We are in touch. They were like the ones who were actually linking us to the different departments at the ministry to help us actually do the proper work, get the right connections, and build the trust with the different departments and ministries that we are working with. So what makes someone become a champion is actually not their title or not one presentation. Every champions we've worked with believed in really the issue, influenced others, created opportunities. They became champions because they felt part of the journey. They felt part of uh, uh, the program. They felt the ownership of the intervention that we are implementing. Next, please. Okay, that next. So I'll also give like some examples from the program, from the activities that we've actually implemented, or from the work that we've done with the different ministries in Jordan, Lebanon, and in Syria. So in Jordan, we've applied exactly the approach of co-creation, create champions. So we didn't just go to the Ministry of Education and say, like, you need a social emotional learning frameworks. We didn't develop it ourselves. We developed it together with the Ministry of Education. So when we talked together, at the beginning, we provided training for the teachers on social emotional learning and learning through play. And then we've realized for the sustainability of the training that we've created, it's great that the ministry have incorporated some of the social emotional work that we did with the teachers in the teachers' professional development, but we thought this is not enough. And we discussed with the ministry about the importance of having a framework for the sustainability of the intervention. But we didn't decide to create it by ourselves. We decided to co-create it together with the ministry. We developed it together. We even developed the recommendations together. Every discussion, every revision, every workshop increased ownership. So it's not our product. It's not IRC's product. It's not Ahlan Simpson's product. It's the ministry's product. The biggest achievement was not the framework. It was the ministry saw itself owning this framework. They saw themselves in this framework. And that's actually what created the ownership for the framework. Now the framework has been officially launched. It has been included as part of the teacher's professional development. It has been also incorporated in the pre-service diploma for the teachers. It's part of the Ministry of Education strategy, and it has been embedded into the ministry's different departments for the sustainability of the framework. And it is because people champion what they are involved in, what they are like co-create. The second example is from Lebanon. So the Lebanon example actually taught us something different. Next slide. So in Lebanon taught us a different lesson. No, the next one. Okay, yes. Alignment creates ownership. We learned from Lebanon a different lesson. Sometimes advocacy is not about introducing something new. It's about strengthening government's priorities. So supporting the National Early Childhood Development Strategy meant aligning partners around one government-led process. So we let the ministry lead the process. The Ministry of Social Affairs and the Higher Council for Childhood have led the process completely. They were the ones who are like sending the invitation, even though it was supported by IRC, financed by IRC. However, we didn't want to lead the process. We wanted the ministry to be leading the process. And that creates stronger ownership and also stronger credibility and sustainability for the development of the strategy. So the ministry did not feel like this is a strategy that was developed by IRC with an international consultant who was hired by IRC, and then like we sent it to them for endorsement. They were actually, it was developed together with the ministry, and it was aligned with their priorities. So the alignment here created the ownership. When you are aligning like your objectives, your goals, your project with national priorities, then the ministry feels the ownership and feels that this is matters. This is part of our priorities, and this is what we want, what we can like, own and sustain. Okay. And the Syrian example, the Syrian story actually taught us something different, because when we worked in Syria, it was way before the collapse of the previous regime. When we entered Syria, we were like, there is no government. We were working only in Northeast and Northwest. So how can we like work together when we didn't have a government? So when we didn't have a government, we actually created a structure that can actually advocate for ECD. So we facilitated the creation of the ECD Syria network. The ECD Syrian network composed of when we started, it was 13 national Syrian organizations. Now we are talking about 30 members who have joined the ECD Syria network. Why I'm bringing this example? Because one organization rarely changes system alone. Through the ECD Syria network, we supported partners to develop one shared agenda. Instead of many voices saying different things, decision maker heard one coordinated message. So now that there is a government in Syria and the ECD network is now advocating for ECD, we're working with 30 members who have like one message, one voice, and partners together multiply the influence. So now we were supporting the ECD Syria network to actually advocate for ECD within the government, and we're doing like training on government advocacy. So we continue to support it for government advocacy, and we continue to amplify the voice of one shared advocacy platform that advocates for ECD within the government. Okay. So looking back, these are probably my biggest lessons. What I learned is that government don't need more presentations. They truly need trusted partners. And to build the trust, you really have to have like this long-term continuous support, not a one-off project, meeting, consultation. You really need to have like a sustainable relation or a continuous relation with the government within the framework of the project that you're actually implemented and also beyond. Like keeping this contact and keeping this connection is very important for the ministry to feel that they are like true partners. And also, trust is built between meetings. Meetings are very important, but we've learned that if you just communicate with government partner for a meeting, for a purpose of a meeting or a launching event or a workshop, they don't feel the ownership because they feel that our relation is based on deliverables or based on certain activity, based on meetings, based on events. However, between meetings, we always had like the line open with the ministry, with like sharing documents, sharing reports, asking about updates, also updating them. Even when we have potential new funding that is not yet confirmed, we also inform them. We go have meetings and co-design together. We don't like present and impose our agenda or our activities on them. Like we co-design every single project that we're implementing with the ministries partners. And that's actually what matters for them. What matters for them is like that now they trust us. They actually call us like to request supports. They are the ones like coming to us rather than like only us, like, bringing them on board because we need a government partner to be part of our delivery. And trust is built between meetings, and champions are often technical people because senior level people like change. Like especially in our region, we always hear of like a government reshuffle, ministers change, deputy ministers change, senior level people change, but technical staff usually remain in the ministry, and they remain like the institutional memory of the ministry. That ensures the sustainability of the work that we're initiating. We invest very much in them because we know that they are passionate about the ECD and the work we're doing, but we also believe that they're the ones who are staying in the ministry, even if the government change or the political leadership change and so on. Co-creation is stronger than consultation. We always have consultation meetings with the ministries, consultation meeting with partners. Now we only say like we only co-create. We don't consult. Like we go and co-create together. We look at the priorities, and that's actually what made our relationship with the ministry sustainable. That's what helped us also embed our services and programs and models within the different ministries. We have amazing examples of like programs like adopted by the government. Social emotional learning and learning through play has been like part of the teachers' professional development in Jordan. ECD health integration is part of the accreditation of the teachers. School readiness program is now fully funded and adopted by the Ministry of Education in Iraq and fully led. And it's all because of the relationships we presented. We presented ourselves as true partners and not as a donor or a technical agency coming for one activity and leaving. And system change requires patience. When I started working on the program, there was zero policy achievements, but the relationship was actually built. The trust was built. The foundation for the policy change was actually there. And this is what takes the most of the time. It takes the biggest, like let's say, like the first few years of the program was about building this relationship. And then later on, we started to actually realize and see the success of the building the relationship with actual policy change happening, to including ECD as part of the budget of the Ministry of Health. This is something that we never thought it's going to happen, but the champion that we built, the relationship that we built, the training and the evidence and the research that we presented led to the belief of the Ministry of the importance of ECD. When they got an opportunity from a US funding to the Ministry of Education, the first thing they thought about is how to sustain the training that we've co-created together. So now the training of the midwives and the nurses has become part of the training that all midwives and nurses are receiving in Jordan. Okay, so before every advocacy meeting, I ask myself different questions, like what should I say? Like not what should I say, but who trusts us? So we already know like who trusts us, who's gonna believe in us, who we have a proper relationship with, who are our champions. At least in every single ministry, or we have one champion, if not more. These are the people that we count on. These the people that we are confident to pick up the phone and call them and consult them, and like in certain things and matters that we are advocating together. Who still need to be involved? And we also look and ask this champion, who do we need to involve? This department, that department. If we're working with the training department, maybe we also need to involve the curricular department, because part of like we want to also, after the training, we also need the training materials to be embedded into the curricula. So we need also the curricular department to be part of this. So thinking about like also who needs to be involved is very important. And not only focusing on one department, but also to consult and involve other departments who we might need at later stage, because involving them from early stages, that can like actually ensure that they feel the ownership and also they value the intervention, and they will support and facilitate our work when we think about scaling, and when we think about sustainability of any intervention we're doing. So we involve them at early stage to make sure that once we finish the training module, or it could be also embedded into the curriculum. So once these questions are answered, advocacy becomes definitely much easier. What's the next slide? Yeah. So if you only remember like few things from my presentation or from like this section, I just want maybe like few things like to be remembered by the end, that advocacy starts before the message. So advocacy starts by building the relationship, by building the trust, the champions. These are very important. Like once we have like those foundations in place, then passing the message would be easier. Then working on a policy recommendation and a policy brief or a policy change would definitely be easier. Because at the end of the day, you go to a meeting or to a consultation, or like, because you have a relationship, because you've built this trust with these partners, and then it is easier for you to be part of this initiative together. So advocacy starts before the message. Champions create these opportunities. It is important you have like this focal point at the ministries, but also at civil society level as well. With the ministries, having these people facilitate the work we're doing and ensure that the work is gonna be heard. There are like champions who are inside the ministries who are advocating for the program. They're advocating for the children. They're advocating for ECD to be included as part of the budget. So involving budget departments, involving finance people is important, because at the end of the day, they are the ones who are going to review and validate and finalize the budget. So having a champion there, like advocating for the inclusion of ECD as part of the budget, is definitely important. And co-creation builds ownership. Like ministries like to feel themselves like appreciated. They feel themselves also that they own the product, they own the project. So I'm really impressed when I go to the Ministry of Social Affairs in Lebanon, or the Ministry of Jordan of Health in Jordan, or the Ministry of Education in Iraq. When they talk about the program, they don't talk about it as like IRC's program or SESIM workshops program. They talk about it as their own program. Now it's the third year that we are no longer implementing the program in Iraq, and the school readiness program is still implemented in Iraq. It's still owned by the government. It's still also fully led by the Ministry of Education, and they still send us reports on regular basis about the reach of the program, about the impact of the program, about like the number of schools and children that have benefited from this program, even though we have stopped like funding this initiative since 2023. Strong relationships are what definitely make advocacy sustainable. And that's it, I think, from my side. Can we go? Yes. Yes. So I think now we will go to Michael.
Yeah.
See how to translate this relationship into messages and influence decision makers. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Madge. So yeah, I'm going to do I think, well, when I spoke to Noor about this a few months ago and what the kind of focus should be, she mentioned that the MMA had obviously put together this huge messaging bank. And I wanted to sort of center some of the conversation around that and how it should be used and could be used as a tool for carrying messages wherever you are, irrespective of who you are and what your role you imagine your role to be. So essentially it's like, yeah, messages to movements. There we are. That's my slide. So yeah, go to the next slide and the next slide again. Okay, so I want to kind of just stress something that I think is really, really important. Everyone, I think, in this room, and I think across the Moving Minds network, is an advocate in some shape or form. Some people might be directly aware of that. Others might feel it's an unimportant aspect of the job. But ultimately, I think everyone has the capacity to change minds, whether that's at a small level or at quite grand ministerial level. And I think both are as significant as each other. So within the network, you have people that are directly affected by crisis and conflict, either as beneficiaries or those that are running services themselves, with program leads, technical staff, people that are actually paid advocates, people that are paid campaigners, communications people, just an entirely sort of incredible network of people that are all bringing different strengths. And I think the evidence that, and this is like exactly what Madge was getting at really, so the evidence that changes a decision maker's mind isn't necessarily coming from someone that has advocacy in their job title. I think just as important is the person that's running a caregiver support group in a displacement setting that knows exactly which part of the system is failing a family and at which point. Very, very precise, specific knowledge, which I think if you scaled up would say something systematic. And in a way, if our targets are things like ministers, heads of states, decision makers at a local authority, finance ministers, whoever it might be, they're not going to generate that evidence themselves unless they're completely on board with the issue. And those people, those decision makers are often rare to find. They're great to have, but they're rare to find. And so I think the practical consequences for this is that advocacy is a capability that needs to be distributed. It's not what you do, it's what you already know. And I think this speaks across any of your work. And so as I'm coming to this, I'm sort of coordinating a global Act for Earliers campaign. There are like 4 people in our team. We're really small. Size is a constraint. It's a real factor. But I think the strength of the campaign and something that we've aimed at the very beginning is really instilling this message that advocacy is distributed, that everybody can play a part and that everybody has a role in amplifying the work that we're doing and taking it forward to new and more concrete levels. So next slide, please. So we have three catalytic goals. They're going to appear as you each press the button. So maybe no, just dub dub dub. And again, I'll just get them all on the screen. Sorry. So we have three goals here, and this is the kind of, I guess, the underpinning of the Act for Earliest campaign. Um, we believe in our big objective is that we're aiming for a global financing summit next year that's focused specifically on increasing investment in the early years. And we decided at the very beginning of this process that we needed to hang that ambition off some very clear messages. So we like Moving Minds Alliance, we're a network our campaign is a network of organizations, so more than 20 organizations. Most of them at the global level, I think would be fair to say, though many of them also are regional ECD networks as well. So there's a kind of spread of organizations. And we consulted or co-created with that group to really refine what we thought were kind of three core policy areas. And so we hit on universal quality primary healthcare, universal inclusive preschool education, and universal support for families. And we felt that that captured most of the key assets and factors that I think really move the dial for families across the world. And so, in building that campaign message, what we wanted to do was really instill these three goals in everything that we were doing. So in every, like I'm the sort of research and evidence lead, so I've written a lot of policy papers, but in all of our campaign materials, we've always included these three messages in everything that we've done and written. And we always underscore that these are the kind of core elements that we would like to see emerge from this global financing summit next year. And by repeating it, it's not a lack of imagination. It's what we could hope to see as campaign discipline. So every partner that writes for its own audience in its own language can still land these three core messages. And so an official that hears them from a national coalition and then from UNICEF and then from a regional network also experiences this consensus. And so that the way that they respond to this is different from like bit piece lobbying, but rather a kind of coherent set of goals that we're all behind. And then when we're talking about the global summit, we can be very clear about what it is that we would like to come out of that. So next slide, please. So for us, I think when you're thinking about a message bank and what it actually needs to do, like a message has done its job when a named decision maker signs something specific. So as part of the goal for the financing summit next year, we have an idea of we want governments, leaders, decision makers at the city, national, subnational level, philanthropic funders, any kind of decision maker with like who can disperse funding that can directly reach children and families needs to carry and come into that summit with a specific commitment. And so we've produced a guide which basically sets out what that commitment should be. And we've talked about it in terms of it being clearly defined and time bound, that we want some kind of senior ownership, meaning a minister, mayor, or governor who has staked some political capital on it. And we want to see a coordinated coalition of action behind them. We also want to understand whether this commitment is costed and sequenced. Because a commitment without a plan is just an aspiration. And is that financing credible and sustainable? And also, what's the source identified? Who is owning that? Is there a named institution responsible for delivery and of tracking progress? And those are kind of like lofty asks, but I think again you can imagine that across both, within a specific context or community, and you can also imagine that at the national level. Effectively, what we're saying is really important here is that we need to have some clear ownership of a demand of a decision, and so messages need to be anchored in that. So what's the significance in terms of the changes for children and families, and how do you then define that ambition as something that's achievable and has a coalition of support behind it? And so you need to see this concrete action with something very specific behind it. So that's not just like a number or an aspiration. It's not a press release. It's not a standalone policy document. It's a tangible commitment which is owned, signed, sealed, and delivered. Okay, next slide, please. So when we're thinking about a message, we've derived a kind of series of 5 tests that we think are all important for that message to actually have impact and land as a delivery ambition. So when you're thinking about a message, we want to know who's going to sign it, who's going to actually take that demand and put their name behind it. What does this then, and you kind of also need to name that level of authority. So that could be a Ministry of Finance, it could be a mayor, a governor, a humanitarian country team, it could be an education cluster. If you can't name it, then your ass is going to just sink. And then you also need to understand what actually changes for children. So it's kind of easily lost in this, but if you're spending on something, how is that going to impact the lives of a child or their family? What's the upside of this? And then we also need to think about what it costs and where you're going to get those costs from. That could be a reallocation of funds, that could be entirely new funds. But I think without a number, a kind of source is just a wish. So you need some kind of domestic budget, reprioritized expenditure, development financing, philanthropy, blended finance, efficiency gains, whatever it might be. But you think you need to really articulate where that cost is going to come from. And then also you need to think about who else is behind it. So I think as Mad was really articulating really well, I think the strongest commitments have a kind of coalition behind it. And that includes ministries, implementers, but it also includes civil society and organizations that have like that directly work with beneficiaries. So, organizations led by people with disabilities or people, refugee-led organizations, whatever it might be. So something that really kind of indicates a kind of broad coalition of support. And also to really importantly, to make that visible in the message, because I think a decision maker is also calculating who will defend them afterwards. Like who's going to actually step forward and go, you know what, we're behind this person. They're staking the political capital on this. This is why it's important. And then I think we also need to know how we know it's a success. So what are the kind of indicators, reporting, disaggregated data that you can really suggest that the change is having an impact. And I think we can get overburdened with the kind of technical implications of that, but I think there's different ways of measuring that go like across different layers. And sometimes, it might just be a focus group, it might just be a kind of survey response, something that indicates a positive direction of travel. But they also could be like, collecting data at a mass scale. You need that evidence there again to support somebody who's staked political capital on something. And I think this kind of also like is important to remember that sometimes I think we build messages in the wrong direction. So we think that the important thing is to start from the evidence, then build a message, then find an audience. And I think it's actually probably the other way around in most cases. Not to say that an audience and a message doesn't need evidence. It's just that I think you should be looking for the evidence to define what you feel your objectives and what your challenge is, and then work back from that. Yeah, I think one extra thing as well is I think also to keep the kind of message local as well. So a national number can move a minister. A global average, I think, can be important, but I think it can also indicate or suggest that decision makers are being lectured to as well. So like something that really sits within the frame of a community, whether at a national level or a subnational level, I think you really need to find the evidence there as well to really make a compelling case. Oh yeah, next slide. Oh yeah, you got through to it. I'm going to skip this one. Okay. So thinking about the Moving Minds Alliance and your own messaging bank, I found this one from your global set of messages. So this is a message that's targeting global leaders, the most opaque, untransparent leaders of all. But and I wanted to think about how you might be able to turn something from a message into a direct demand. So I think on the left, this is the Moving Minds Alliance message as it stands. And on the right, I think, is how you might theoretically shape it as a particular ask that a demand that a decision maker can act on. So you can see here, I've named an actor. I've established an action, so a protected early childhood budget line. I've also established where that might go, so within a national refugee response plan, reaching a named number of children. I think you need evidence to determine what that might be, but you could also use that as an objective as well. And then finance through a name mix, so reported annually and disaggregated by disability and displacement. So you can also see where how you might then report and track that. So I think what's really important here is that the left is the message, and I think that is evergreen and remains consistent in all contexts. The right, I think, needs to be adapted and contextualized depending on who your target is. So Ministry of Finance is quite lofty, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that. Also, that audience, the sort of beneficiaries can also shift as well. And I think also in going from the left to the right, it's also important to think, to anticipate and to expect for this demand to be refused for a stated reason. And by giving a specific cause and response, you're giving someone the opportunity to refuse it, but they have to give a reason why. On the left, I think they can be slightly more opaque. They can just say, oh, this is not something we can do. But on the right, it's after, okay, we can't do this for X, Y, and Z. And I think that can feel like a defeat or a loss. But I think more accurately, it should be termed as a learning point. So how you think you can continue to reshape the ask to fit the challenges presented in the refusal, or find more compelling support or effort, evidence or support to really redefine what that ask should be without necessarily changing your message. So I think it's that kind of like right to left is I think is a really important direction of travel, but I think hold the left ear and then the right, be prepared to make changes and amendments across the way. I did think about doing an exercise. I'm just not how long do we have? No.
So we have 10 minutes left. So
Yeah,
maybe if we leave like 5 minutes for questions and answers, and
yeah.
then maybe this exercise could be done like individually and like people write on a notebook or something.
Yeah. Maybe this is something to just like pop into the chat. So basically, on the next slide, probably a bit complicated actually, now that I think about it. So there are three messages here. Conscious that there's a lot of information on the previous slide that's probably now missing for people. Okay, I think it's just okay. Let's just think about these in terms of like how you might actually then integrate or turn these into actual demands. So just I think just reflect on these questions or these messages and maybe just put into the chat how you might then turn them into a demand. And I'll give you like 5 minutes to do that while I wrap up. So maybe just stay on this slide. But yeah, just to I think just to emphasize, to re-emphasize that basically I think that everyone is an advocate, that we always need to start from the decision, not the evidence. We all need to work coherently and across networks to say the same, to carry the same messages forward. But we also need to think about how you're going to land that message. So how do you actually turn that message into a demand where the decision maker that you're putting the message to can feel that they can act and be compelled to make a specific change that you're asking them of. And then also just think about how you can then redefine that ask so that it can be refused. So that even if it's refused, that you can sort of adapt and reshape your message to meet the nature of that refusal and work with the evidence that you're being presented.
Michael, I would
Yeah,
say since we're going to be sharing all the documents afterwards, maybe
yeah,
we can share this exercise with everyone to do as well, and maybe like share back just because we have like 5 minutes
yeah,
left, and like I know there's some people who want to ask questions to you and Majd as well, so maybe we can if
yeah,
you're okay with that,
yeah.
open
Let's
it
do
up.
that.
Yeah,
Okay, okay. Thank you.
no worries. Thank you and Majd so much. Yeah, I learned so much as well from you both. um I don't know, anyone would like to ask a question to Michael or Majd? You can just put your hands up or unmute yourself and ask.
There's already two questions in the chat.
Yeah,
Ah,
there's one from Carlos and one to and one from Cheng.
yeah.
One for
Cheng is
me, one
first.
for
Yeah,
Michael. I can go first
yeah,
while others are. Yeah, so I read the question first. So Sheng asked, "Hi Majd, how are you identifying the champions in these ministries before the advocacy before advocacy proper as you have explained. Thank you. Thank you so much. This is actually a very good question. We don't usually start by looking for champions. We start by building the relationship first. With like a broad group of stakeholders and try to understand their priorities. But over time, certain people naturally stand out. They are the ones who constantly show up in meetings and engage in discussions. They ask thoughtful questions and look for solutions. They connect us with other colleagues in other departments. So you see them say, I think you have to meet this colleague. I think this person would help you with that. So they always offering to support and making connections with other colleagues, other departments, even other ministries or other organizations. They connect us with colleagues in other departments, but they also continue the conversations between meetings. So they stay in touch. They do follow up. They start advocating for the issue internally, even when we are not in the room and we are not there. So these are often the early signs of a champion. We also don't try to create champions by convincing them. We create the conditions for champions to actually emerge by listening, co-creating solutions, respecting their experience and giving them ownership of the process. Also, when we go to when we meet ministers or senior level people, we also credit them and we thank them for the work they do. We say thanks to XY, because ministers and deputies don't necessarily know about the work that these technical people are doing. So we try also to credit them in front of senior level people, and that creates ownership and commitment from their side. Once they see the value and feel that the work is also theirs, not just ours, they often become the strongest advocate within the system. So the example I brought from Jordan with the Ministry of Health, we have this technical colleague who became increasingly engaged throughout the co-development of the training. And then she began introducing us to other colleagues, advocating internally for the work and identifying opportunities to institutionalize from even early stages. We should talk to this. We should consider the nursing council. So we didn't identify her as a champion at the beginning, but actually she became one through this partnership because of her engagement and her work. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Michael, over to you for Carlos's question.
Yeah, so Carlos is asking, how do you actually turn a decision maker signing something into an actual pledge that then is tracked and followed up on? It's very hard, but I think it's not impossible. So one of the big things that we're doing at the moment is defining what the accountability framework for the summit will be. So what are the commitments that are people bringing to, I've got 58 seconds, bringing to the summit, and how do we continue to track them afterwards? We think that there's a really, really important role for civil society and other partners to play in this. So obviously at the data level, you need to see that the money is flowing through. There needs to be a specific budget line, maybe there needs to be some specific action, but it's up to civil society, I think, to really monitor and measure the impact on children and families themselves. And because we're looking for commitments to be designed collaboratively with civil society and official partners within governments and subnational governments, we feel that they have potentially a greater ownership on this. So I think in any sort of active civil society movement, you're advocating for the people that you're working with, but at the same time, you're also ensuring and tracking that the services that have been pledged to them are actually being received. So that's the kind of dynamic that we would like to see. It's complicated, but important. Thanks.
Thank you both so much. I hope everyone found